Subcommittee will come to order. Good morning. I'm pleased to see everybody here today, especially on such a busy day. By everybody, I guess it's just us. We're going to discuss 11 bills this morning, but before we get started, I want to remind everyone we're going to take a moment to reflect on why we're here speaking about these incredibly important topics. I'd like to highlight a fellow veteran, Senior Chief Mike Day, former Navy SEAL, Navy Cross recipient. He's been a friend of mine for a couple decades, and he can only be described as an American hero. He was shot 27 times in Iraq. With his primary weapon disabled, he drew his pistol, and then he killed all of the men that shot him 27 times. Then he walked himself to the medical evacuation helicopter. 3 days ago, Senior Chief Mike Day succumbed to his unseen war wounds. They're the devils that plague so many of us that have served our nation, and he took his own life. We're here today to prevent this from ever happening again. So, with that said, let's get into this. Today we're going to highlight 11 bills. I'm only going to speak about 4 of them in the interest of time. The first one I'd like to speak about is H.R. 1798. I introduced this, and it's the Protect Military Dependents Act. And in a nutshell, this is what it does. If you are eligible for veterans' educational benefits and you fail to meet your obligation after giving these benefits to your children or your spouse, they cannot be held financially accountable. You can and you should. So that's, to me, that's a winner right there. And then the Employee Vets Act, what this does is it allows members of the Department of Labor to interact with our service members during the Transition Assistance Program, which is when you're getting out of the service, just to make sure that hopefully our veterans, or the soon-to-be veterans, are employed prior to getting out of the service, which will help prevent suicide. I also want to talk about the Vet Tech bill, which I think is awesome. And it's introduced by a friend of mine named Juan Subcommittee. He is just a fantastic guy from Arizona. And it's been an incredibly successful program where it's actually working. And we want to take this from a temporary thing to a permanent thing. And then in the spirit of bipartisanship, I'd like to also highlight a bill. It's H.R. 645. It was introduced by Representative McCormick. He's a Democrat from Florida. And this allows several different things to help combat veterans' homelessness. All of this is in the record. And I do have a couple questions. First and foremost, with the bill, the Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act, in 2022, fiscal year 2022, the VA only expended 34% of the funds allocated to them, $20 million. 2 things I want to know. Where did the money go that you didn't spend? And I also want to know why you're asking for the same amount of money. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. We'll get to that in a sec. And then I also want to make sure that, can I have that, please? Excuse me. Prior to yielding to the ranking member, excuse me, I'm new at this. Okay. While we're waiting for the ranking member to appear, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the witness panel. Our first witnesses are from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Mr. Joseph Garcia, Executive Director of Education Services, Mr. Nick Pamprin, Executive Director of Veterans Readiness and Employment, and Mr. Keith Harris, Senior Executive Homeless Agent. I would ask everybody to, I'd ask the Department of Veterans Affairs witnesses on our first panel to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Mr. Garcia, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and other members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss pending legislation that would affect VA's programs, and services. With me today are Dr. Keith Harris, National Director of Clinical Operations in the Homeless Program Office at the Veterans Health Administration, and Nick Pamperin, Executive Director for Veteran Readiness and Employment Service at the Veterans Benefit Administration. Mr. Chairman, with 11 bills on the agenda, I will highlight several in my oral statement. While VA fully supports several of the proposed bills, there are areas of concern for some, and were outlined in more detail in my written testimony. VA supports, with amendments, the draft VetTech Authorization Act of 2023. This bill would permanently authorize VA to carry out a program for covered individuals with the opportunity to enroll in high technology education. First, the bill would only authorize 8,000 covered individuals to participate during a fiscal year. These individuals could carry over into the next fiscal year and thus limit the number who could participate in the program. Second, this bill would mandate that VA charge 1 month of entitlement for covered individuals who have remaining entitlement under other GI Bill chapters for every month of the entitlement used under this high technology program. This provision would be inequitable as it would allow some beneficiaries who have already used all of their VA educational benefits to receive more entitlement, while others would lose out on their remaining entitlement. VA would support 2 other bills on the agenda if they were amended, specifically the draft bill that would allow VA to restore educational assistance entitlement because of the suspension or termination of a course or program by reason of a determination of fraud by the Commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission or the Secretary of Education, and the draft bill regarding liability for overpayments in case of transferred entitlement under the post-9/11 GI Bill. One of the bills that VA has concerns with is H.R. 291, the Vaccine Discharge Parity Act. This bill would include a general discharge under honorable conditions on the sole basis that the individual failed to obey lawful order to receive a COVID-19 vaccine as a qualifying discharge for entitlement under the Montgomery and post-9/11 GI Bills. VA opposes this bill as we are concerned that enactment would create inequity for service members discharged for various reasons and not meeting the honorable discharge requirement. Only service members with the COVID-19 character of discharge reason would be eligible to receive educational assistance, while service members with the same character of discharge but different reasons would not be eligible for educational assistance. VA opposes Section 2C of the bill that would adjust home loan fees with the purpose of helping to offset the cost of this bill. VA also opposes the draft Streamlining Aviation for Eligible Veterans Act, or the Safe Veterans Act. This bill would add a statement that a rehabilitation program may include flight training that does not lead to a degree. The purpose of the VRNE program is to provide all services and assistance necessary to enable veterans with service-connected disabilities to achieve independence in daily living and to obtain and maintain suitable employment. A rehabilitation program that includes flight training but does not lead to a degree would be inconsistent with VRNE's training program requirements. Finally, VA fully supports the draft bill that would require VA to provide certificates of eligibility and award letters using electronic means. VA also fully supports the bill that increases the amount for educational assistance in the Republic of the Philippines. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I will pass it over to Dr. Harris for his opening statement from VHA.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. The written statement from Mr. Garcia will be entered into the hearing record. Dr. Harris, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, rest of the members of the committee, committee staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak specifically today to H.R. 645, the Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act. We're here to speak in strong support of this bill. H.R. 645 permanently authorizes the vital temporary flexibilities granted in Section 4201 of Isaacson Roe that are set to expire with the end of the public health emergency on May 11th. I'm here in part to provide a little background as to where these flexibilities came from. Despite the essential nature of these flexibilities, VA historically was not authorized to provide them. Early in the COVID pandemic, both the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committees approached us at VA and asked what we needed to support homeless veterans in this unprecedented time. Homeless individuals already face great risks in terms of morbidity and mortality, and these risks are exponentially greater in the face of COVID. We consulted with homeless program personnel around the country and developed a list of flexibilities that would enable us to best respond to the needs of homeless veterans. We brought those back to the committees and engaged in a productive and collaborative process at that point that culminated with Section 4201 of Isakson Roe. For the first time in the history of VA homeless programs under 4201, medical centers have been able to directly purchase and provide life-saving food, water, clothing, supplies to homeless veterans. We've also provided vital transportation assistance as well as communications devices, all of which have allowed homeless and at-risk veterans to connect with healthcare providers, employers, landlords, and support networks. We estimate that over 100,000 veterans have benefited in one form or another from this life-changing authority. And we attribute recent progress in housing homeless veterans in part to this authority and its impact on services. In preparation for this hearing, I asked network homeless coordinators around the country for examples of the impact of 4201 on veterans. I received at this point 100 stories from field staff around the country, and literally more are still coming in. I just checked my phone before we started. I wanted to share one brief illustrative example that highlights the impact of authority to directly pay for shelter, phone, and transportation. This veteran was residing in a storage shed in the middle of rural America. Because of 4201 authority, VA was able to equip the veteran with a phone, pay for a hotel to get him immediately off the streets, and use rideshare to get him to the hotel. I am certain this assistance saved his life, as he refused to leave the storage shed if he had to go into a shelter and live with other people. The Midwest was experiencing the Arctic blast with temperatures reaching 17 below zero. He then used his phone and rideshare for housing searches, appointments, and job interviews. The veteran is now employed, housed, and thriving in the HUD-VASH program. Before 4201, this veteran would literally likely have died in that freezing storage shed. Thousands of veterans have similarly benefited from this life-changing and even life-saving authority. And looking ahead, thousands more will need the kinds of assistance that 4201 made possible. For these reasons, we applaud Congress for taking action on this bill, and we strongly support H.R. 645 to permanently authorize the flexibilities in 4201. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. The written statement of Dr. Harris will be entered into the record for the hearing. In accordance with Committee Rule 5E, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Surface, please, excuse me if I mispronounce that, McCormick from Florida, be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Okay. Without objection. Without objection, so ordered. I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Levin, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Van Orden. Thank you for holding this legislative hearing on 11 pieces of legislation today. Before getting started, I just wanted to offer my prayers for the families of the 9 soldiers who were killed this morning after 2 U.S. Army helicopters collided during a training mission near an Army base along the Kentucky-Tennessee border. Our prayers are with them and their families. The work we do today will prepare our subcommittee to continue building upon our accomplishments over the last 4 years to improve veteran education, house more homeless veterans, and place more veterans into jobs. I want to personally thank the chairman for including my legislation, H.R. 1786, to employ more veterans at the Department of Interior. Many of you know I place a great importance on conserving our federal lands and waters, and I can think of no better group of individuals to continue their service by protecting our natural treasures than our veterans. Not only will our bipartisan GROW Act employ veterans, but I believe it will also create a hiring model for all federal agencies in the future. We need to hire more veterans. In addition, I'm pleased that Chairman Van Orden included H.R. 645, the Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act, from our colleague, Representative Sherflus McCormick. Chairman, your pronunciation was perfect. Well done. Congress acted swiftly during the COVID-19 pandemic to provide VA temporary authorities, and no one can argue with the results. Since this committee provided VA with the temporary authorities which would be made permanent by H.R. 645, nearly $9 million have been used to support over 39,000 homeless or at-risk veterans with foundational needs like food, shelter, clothing, and transportation to medical appointments and job interviews. VA's work during the pandemic to help more homeless veterans was truly an accomplishment, but it was only possible because this committee acted. Now it's time to act again before authorities are lost. This legislation will ensure that when VA and its community providers are caring for homeless veterans, they're able to purchase basic needs in support of those veterans' journeys into stable, permanent housing. Also on the agenda today is H.R. 1767 from Representative Ramirez, which, excitingly, is the first piece of legislation she has introduced as a member of Congress. The Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act would make thousands of veterans whole after schools they attended failed them. So I'm proud to be a co-lead on the legislation, and I hope to see it enacted into law. Bipartisan student veteran education reform has also been a hallmark of this committee. We've delivered time and time again, but our work is not done. The legislation builds upon our Isaacson-Roe Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act of 2020 and the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022, and continues to push bad actors out of the veteran education space. Finally, I'm glad that we're going to be considering two Republican bills that I'm co-leading. H.R. 1169, the VA E-Notification Enhancement Act, from my friend Representative Arrington of Texas, would ensure that veterans can receive notifications for education benefits electronically, making the process easier, quicker, and more efficient for veterans. And H.R. 1635, the Filipino Education Fairness Act from Representative Kiggins, finally fixes an outdated limitation on GI Bill payments for education programs in the Philippines. We must deliver fairness for student veterans who wish to pursue their education in the Philippines, and for that matter, everywhere else. With that, I'm ready to get to work today, ready to hear views from VA and our VSO partners. And are we going straight to questions, or I'll yield back my time for now?
That would be great. We're just going to
Perfect.
things then go right into
Go
questions.
for it.
All right. Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I appreciate
Thank
it
you,
greatly.
Chairman.
We will now proceed directly to questions. I ask members and witnesses to please respect the 5-minute rule. I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. We kind of covered this briefly. I'm only going to talk about 4 of the 11 bills in the spirit of bipartisanship. We'll be highlighting one from my Democratic colleagues. The first one is H.R. 1798 that I introduced, the Protecting Military Dependents Act. We spoke about this. If a service member is eligible for VA benefits and he gives those to his or her children or spouse for educational benefits, and then the service member does not meet the threshold for those benefits any longer due to misconduct, that the child or the spouse is not held accountable financially by the government. I think that's just the right thing to do. The Employee Acts, again, it's going to amend Title 38 to make sure that members of the Department of Labor from each state can participate in the Transition Assistance Program with the goal of having our veterans employed prior to leaving the service. Vet Tech, are you kidding me? It's working. Let's do more of that, introduced by Juan Ciscomani, my Republican colleague from Arizona. And then I also want to highlight the H.R. 645, Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act, and that is introduced by my friend Representative Sir Phyllis McCormick. Yes! Jeez, that's a hard one. All right, Dr. Harris. Housing homeless veterans is an incredibly important to the subcommittee and for my ranking member, Mr. Levin, and his top priority legislative, his top legislative priority, and I appreciate that greatly. We want to make sure that we can do whatever we can for these veterans to fulfill that, but we still also have to uphold our duty to protect the taxpayers from rampant spending. H.R. 645 would make permanent Section 4201 of the Isaacson and Roe Veterans Health Care Benefit Program Act of 2020. However, the data supplied to our committee by you shows that you used only 34% of the funds authorized in fiscal year 22. So my two questions are this. It's a $20 million program. 66% of these monies went unexpended. Where is the rest of the money?
Thank you, sir. So I'd love to say there's a bit to unpack in this. It's not a very simple yes or no.
All right.
FY22 was the first full year we'd had this authority.
Okay.
That $20 million is not a fixed program budgeted amount. It's the amount we estimated was needed by the field that year. We wanted to aim high. The last thing we wanted was for medical centers to run out of money with homeless veterans still in need.
Yep.
We'd never had this before. We took a guess at $20 million. Turned out a lot less than that was spent in 22. There's different reasons for that. We didn't know what to estimate the need at. There were also loads of obstacles in terms of logistics and procurement and purchasing these things. homeless programs have wanted for decades to have these authorities. They've been told no for decades. Fiscal departments have been trained to say no to these things for decades. So there's a lot of that to overcome. So all that said, we in FY23, we're on pace now to spend what annualized would be about $8 million a year. That's actually the amount we allocated for FY23. So we dialed the amount we sent out significantly lower, down to $8 million. While we're not on pace to hit that now, the month of March, we spent $731,000, which annualizes $8.8 million. So we think we've now dialed in the amount that field staff need and how much we should put out. As for where the money from FY22 went, VHA Finance handles ARP funds, which is how this was funded. They sweep that excess back on a pretty regular basis, actually. Happy to take that question for the record as to what exactly was done with it at that point.
Thank you. The quick follow-up, though, is you're asking for $20 million,
Yes.
but you just said you needed 8.
That's the rest to unpack. There's several pieces of this.
Okay, let's take that for the record, please. Mr. Garcia, during the last briefing, the committee staff received, they were told that currently you only have 1 full-time employee working for Vet Tech. Is that correct?
Sir, in education service, we recently hired somebody. She was a mom with 2 children. She took the Vet Tech training online, which is great because she is a mom that had child care concerns. She actually was hired but then lost a job because her husband is a long-haul truck driver. So she had to lose that job because of child care concerns. Our staff was working with her and actually placed her, and she is now helping us by designing a SharePoint site and using her project management skills from Vet Tech to improve our systems and processes. So that, to your point, is another example of the Vet Tech success. We recently hired her through the Vet Tech program.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mr. Garcia. I'd like to have my staff connect with you again to make sure that we can flesh this out completely, but in respecting my fellow members' time, I will now yield and recognize Ranking Member Levin for 5 minutes to question the witnesses.
I thank my friend, the chairman, and I'll actually start by picking up where he left off. I'll ask Dr. Harris, why are you asking for $20 million when you only need 8?
Thank you, sir. I hate unfinished answers. The reason is that that number includes both the goods and services side of 4201, but also the ride share program, which is also authorized under the transportation portion of 4201 and in HR 645. So the accounting you've received to date is strictly for the rides and goods and services, but rideshare is also included in our cost projections going forward. That explains the delta, 12 million for rideshare, 8 million for goods and services.
All right, I appreciate that clarification. And let me just say I certainly support my friend and colleague, Congresswoman Chair Phyllis McCormick, HR 645, Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act. Proud to co-sponsor the bill. Think it fills a critical gap in resources for homeless veterans. Let me shift to something we heard last week at our committee's budget hearing. I'd asked Secretary McDonough about the expiration of the elevated grant and per diem rate for veterans residing in transitional housing. He indicated that the expiration is going to create major problems for VA to end veteran homelessness and could significantly set us back from reaching that shared goal. We know how vital nonprofits are to VA's efforts to house every homeless veteran. Got great relationships with our local nonprofits in San Diego. Very concerned about the stress that the expiration of these authorities will put on our community partners. And I'll go back to you, Dr. Harris. As the authority expires for the grant and per diem rate, how will our reliance on community nonprofits and philanthropy shift? And can we reasonably expect nonprofits to be able to fill the gaps in services and resources that Congress could provide by making these authorities permanent and fully funding VA's homeless programs?
It's a really important question, and with your permission, I'm going to expand the answer to this expiring authority also.
You've got time to unpack.
Because you're right that the elevated rate and grant per diem is expiring. That will put a strain on grantees and nonprofits, but the expiration of 4201's authority will put a much greater strain on those, and it ends up being the same answer, but that's what I want to speak to. And as much as I'd like to say otherwise, the answer is no, they cannot fill all the gaps that are left when we can't do it ourselves. And I want to be clear about what I mean by that. We have so many permanent housing resources. We have 100,000 plus HUD-VASH vouchers. We have millions in SSVF. We have loads of temporary and transitional resources. We can house homeless veterans in the resources we have. We could house thousands more than we have now. The problem is getting them into those beds and keeping them there. And that's where these flexibilities have helped us the most. And I just want to give you a quick sense of how that works. Before these authorities, veteran shows up at the ER, chronically homeless, seriously mentally ill, and we say, Mr. Smith, we're not going to be able to admit you tonight. You're going to have to go to a shelter. Here's a list. Go find a shelter. You don't have a car, you're going to need to find public transportation. Here's a map of public transportation. It's cold outside. I wish we could give you a coat, but we can't. But here's a list of charities who can do that. You need help with case management, we'll set up an appointment next week and come on back and we'll help you. That's the way it was for decades. It's a miracle we housed as many homeless veterans as we did. With these flexibilities, the answer is we're going to put you in a hotel tonight. You don't have to get there yourself. We're going to use rideshare to get you straight from here to that hotel. We're going to get you food tonight. We're going to get you clothed, and then we're going to give you a phone so that you can be in touch with your case manager right from that room and start working on housing. The stories I heard this week all say the same thing. We need that. Without that, veterans fall through the cracks, and that's the critical thing. These flexibilities have filled those cracks.
Really important comments. Thank you so much. And with time I have left, I'll turn to Mr. Garcia. VA is still in the midst of modernizing all its education IT systems. Actually think you've come a long way. I remember going with staff and with members to Muskogee, Oklahoma, where we saw about a 40 or 50-year-old IT system out there. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I have HR 1169, VA E-Notification Enhancement Act, which Jody Arrington continues those efforts by requiring electronic certificates of eligibility. Your testimony states that VA is already in process of meeting some of those goals. When do you expect all the provisions of that bill to be met?
Sir, we believe that through the Digital GI Bill modernization, we're already underway. So in August 2022, original claims now have that ability to receive the electronic notification or opt out if they choose to. So it's part of the Digital GI Bill effort, which is a long-term effort, as you know. So we're looking at the end of 2025 to have all of that electronic notification done as part of the Digital GI modernization effort.
I appreciate that. I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I now recognize Ms. Ramirez from Illinois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Van Orden and Ranking Member Mike Levin. I want to first thank you for including my bill, House Resolution 1767, the Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act, in today's legislative hearing. As I've been hearing the conversation, my colleagues know that the work of housing, education, and healthcare is extremely important to me, and I certainly believe that when it comes to our veterans, there's an intersection between stable housing, access to health care, and being able to get the education necessary to get the career that they deserve with living wages and retiring with dignity. I have presented a bill here today to the legislative hearing. The GI Bill has had a profound impact on veterans returning to civilian life, as well as on the education community at large. The educational benefits provided by the GI Bill have been instrumental in helping veterans improve their economic security and promote their success in post-secondary education. Those benefits have helped ensure that veterans are fully supported and integrated. And as I've heard you talk today, particularly about the budget and housing, I'd like to hear a little bit more as we look at the challenges that we see, particularly around housing. What do you think in the next year the housing need could look like for our veterans, especially as we know that moving from shelter to permanent housing also requires for them to have stable jobs, and this would certainly mean that they, in some cases, to have that permanent housing, they would be paying, for a one-bedroom, depending on where they live, $1,500, to other places for a two-bedroom, $2,500. So talk to me a little bit more about the necessity for some of these supports that you talk about as we look at some of the housing insecurity over the next year.
Yes, thank you. I promise I'm going to try to talk shorter this time. I'm using up everyone's time. I apologize. It's an incredibly important need that you note. I want to say again, we have permanent housing resources. The challenge is, as you noted, getting people into those and the various supports that requires. The stories I read this week, the 100+ examples of the way these flexibilities helped, showed how important those are. It takes a lot to get into housing. That is a long road to go from the streets to housing, and there are many steps along that way, and they require, you can do virtually none of it without a phone. You can't do much of it without transportation. You can't go to the housing authority. You can't go to the DMV or Social Security office. You can't go see apartments, attend open houses, meet with landlords. To get a job, you need a driver's license. You need the tools that these flexibilities provide to get those. All those steps have to happen before we get into housing. You noted the market. The lack of affordable housing is one of the single biggest forces we're up against in terms of ultimately ending veteran homelessness. And we're working with HUD on various ways to improve those processes, to potentially increase fair market rent rates. There's a lot of work underway, way more than I can speak to right this second. But those flexibility, without those, and they expire May 11th, we will face a very difficult road unless and until these authorities are made permanent.
Got it. And I just want to go back to specifically the ride share component of it. So you're saying that oftentimes when veterans have showed up at the VA for support services to be able to help relocate to a shelter, transitional housing, or even to go for these appointments, they've had to figure out how to get to the place, or they've had to figure out the case management appointment the next week. You're saying being able to provide that transportation and being able to do more of that one-stop service makes it easier for them to navigate and certainly more quickly stabilize their housing situation? Absolutely.
Okay. It is the centerpiece of the examples I received this week. It's at the center of all of it. Yeah. It is very difficult to get from point A to point B for any of us in public transportation.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. I now recognize Mr. McGarvey from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start off, Mr. Chairman, by echoing your comments and offering the thoughts and prayers for the soldiers who lost their lives in the helicopter crash near my home state of Kentucky at Fort Campbell. The brave men and women of Fort Campbell are certainly integral to our state and our country and our security, and it's just awful news to wake up this morning and learn of their passing. I think it also highlights what we need to do to help the men and women who are willing to put on a uniform and sacrifice everything to make sure that we are safe. And so as I look at some of the bills, we've got some great bills in front of this committee that really do look out for our veterans. One of them, H.R. 1699, the Vet Tech Authorization Act, offered by my colleague, Mr. Subcommittee. It's a jobs program, not an education program, which means that we have an expectation that the participants in this program are going to get a good job when they finish. In fact, the requirements, the providers who are giving this training to vets in the technology space is that they are not paid until the vets actually get a job. What I want to make sure with you guys this morning is that that's not providing a perverse incentive, where we want to make sure that our veterans aren't just getting a job, but getting a good job, and getting a good job where they're making a good salary and good benefits. This is not just a program to get any job, it's to get a quality job, but that's not specified in the law right now. Mr. Garcia, would you support requirements for providers that veterans are hired into jobs with competitive salaries and other job quality metrics?
Thank you, sir. So we're all in agreement that VetTech is successful, right? So the metrics that we have now, the outcome measures show they're hired within about 58 days for employment, average salary $65,000. So they're good paying jobs. So I think we would continue to support really looking at meaningful outcomes, to make sure they have a good paying job that also is an area that they want to get into, right, and that they're studied for. And so we have changed our form that tracks that to expand more data that we can analyze and make sure that we're tracking good outcome measures for our veterans that use vet tech. Hopefully that addresses that.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And because we are talking about the technology sector, and again, like you said, there's really good things happening. I just want to make sure that good things continue to happen for our veterans who are in programs like this. As you know, Vet Tech is an employment program, and it is susceptible to outside factors just like anything else. We're seeing news, particularly out of places like Silicon Valley, about the dip in employment in the tech sector right now. Is veteran employment in the tech industry shrinking right now? Are we seeing it shrink with layoffs? What kind of trends are you all seeing come about in this sector and with this program?
Yes, sir. We're looking at that. Obviously, the news is the high number of layoffs that are from the larger companies. But what we're looking at, what we're noticing is that at the smaller companies, the mid-sized companies, that's not really an issue right now, as what you see in the news. A lot of the hiring was early on that peaked, and there was maybe a right-sizing, what you're seeing in terms of getting to that number. That's not the best answer, but I think there was a huge increase, and then it kind of modified back down, so that's some of the settling. There's also concerns because some of the benefit packages, severance packages from those high layoffs are like up to 6 months, so we're tracking to make sure that we're watching those as well that maybe are not really impacted right away because of a good severance package. We want to make sure that they're not impacted down the road, right? So we are looking at the industry as a whole, but again, it looks like at the smaller to mid-size tech companies, it looks like there's not as prevalent as what you see in the news with the high volume companies.
Thank you. And obviously, that's something we want to continue to watch. We want this to be successful. We want our veterans to have good training and get into good quality jobs. So as you all continue to monitor this, we can check back with you, but certainly want to know how to address this if we see this becoming a problem and make sure, again, our veterans are taken care of after they've served us. Thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. McGarvey. I would now like to recognize Ms. Trephilis McCormick from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. And thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you also for your testimony and being here today. I want to start off also recognizing our soldiers who lost their life. They're definitely in our prayers and our condolences. And I also want to start off by thanking the Deputy General Counsel, Ali Simono, of the House Veteran Affairs Committee for her dedication to solving veterans' homelessness and ending food insecurity in our veterans. With her help, these issues will be a thing of the past. Thank you, Ali. Dr. Harris, thank you for being here. My bipartisan legislation, H.R. 645, the Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act, would permanently authorize us to fund on basic needs for homeless veterans, such as food, transportation, communication devices, and shelter. I think we can agree that these are essential that every person requires to thrive. They are the foundation of a person's well-being. Since 2021, VA has helped over 39,000 homeless veterans access basic goods and services and provided nearly 42,000 homeless veterans with over 400,000 rides to medical appointments and job interviews and through this authority. Dr. Harris, can you please explain how the VA filled these needs for homeless veterans prior to the pandemic?
Yes, ma'am, and my direct gratitude to you for introducing this bill, and second the commendation of Ali as well. In short, we were unable to directly provide these things prior to these flexibilities. We could provide a veteran a sandwich if he or she had appointments across an entire day. We could reimburse travel if they live far enough away. Those are great for a standard veteran with a car and a job and a stable life. They don't begin to touch the needs of a homeless veteran. We were unable to provide for these before.
Thank you. Are VA staff and clinicians seeing that this authority is helping to improve homeless veterans' outcomes in terms of getting and keeping them stable and housed?
Yes. So as I noted, I had asked the field for examples of this, and I wish I had time to share them all. The veteran with cancer who couldn't attend chemo appointments because they were too far away through public transportation, but we got him there with rideshare. The suicidal veteran whose only companion was his dog, whose prospective landlord wouldn't let him move in, but we were able to cover pet fees and deposits, and he was able to move in and live stably. The woman fleeing fleeing domestic violence late on a Friday, shelter beds full, grant per diem beds full. We were able to put her in a hotel over the weekend. Veteran whose apartment burned down, she and her kids were facing separation because they couldn't move into a shelter together. We're able to put them all in a hotel and stay in that hotel stably until they could move back into a HUD-VASH program. Countless veterans who could not make medically necessary life-saving appointments without transportation. Rideshare gets them there. We couldn't do that in the past. Countless veterans facing eviction, if not for assistance we could provide either through utilities arrears, pest infestations, hoarding problems. These are things we could help veterans with. This is what kept veterans in housing. I could go on way longer than my 5 minutes with those examples. I will stop.
Well, thank you. My last and final question, how are the communication devices authorized in this bill utilized by homeless veterans? Can you discuss the importance of access to cell phones or laptops for the homeless veterans?
Yes, thank you. It's incredibly important. We're aware there is some skepticism about the phones. There's concerns of kind of worst case scenarios, veterans selling these for a profit, for money, using them to buy drugs. There are controls we've built in to that process. We think we've done a good job with that. We think medical center staff and veterans themselves have done a good job with that. On the flip side, I would argue there is no more single important tool for both a homeless veteran, but also for any of us, than a phone in today's life. How long would any of us survive in our jobs, in our lives, without one? And it may feel like it ought to be easier for somebody on the streets. It's harder. All those challenges are compounded. Everything you have to do to move from the streets to housing requires some degree of communication, access to information, not the least of which is contact with your VA providers, but landlords, employers, friends and family, the social support network that keeps us sane, that prevents the social isolation that can lead to eviction. The phones are incredibly important, and dollar for dollar are likely the single best investment we've made under these authorities.
Thank you. And this is actually my final question, even though I said the last one was. How do you see the expiration of this authority, if we are not able to make it permanent, affecting our ability to end and prevent veterans' homelessness in short and in the long term?
It's a really important question. I'm not stating an agency position here, but based on my own experience and based on the feedback in the 100+ examples I received, I do not think it's possible to completely, totally end veteran homelessness without these flexibilities. And it's not that we don't have the permanent housing resources, as I noted earlier. It's the ability to keep the veterans from falling through the cracks, who always have in the past, who will begin to again, despite everyone's best efforts. Without these flexibilities, we need them.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Phyllis McCormick. Thank you very much, witnesses, for coming. I appreciate it very much. You are now excused, and I would hope that you'd stay with us for the next panel. In our second panel, we have several veteran service organizations. Ms. Tammy Bartlett from Student Veterans of America, Mr. Matthew Brennan from the American Legion, Ms. Alicia Bodie from Code Platoon and the Vet Tech Working Group, and Mr. Patrick Murray from Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'd like to welcome the witnesses on our second panel to the witness table. I ask that you all please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much, and let the record reflect that the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. I want you all to know that we've read your written testimony. In the interest of time, we're going to go right into questions, and I ask for unanimous consent to waive the taking of this oral testimony and proceed directly to questioning the witnesses. All right, without objection, so ordered. Pretty quick. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes, and I just have one question. Mr. Murray, from VFW, which I am a lifetime member. Where's Mr.? Oh, there you are, sir. Where's your cover, Mr. Murray?
We don't wear covers during testimony, sir.
Oh my gosh. Well, all right. I hope you have it with you. In your testimony, you indicated support for the Streamlining Aviation for Eligibility Veterans Act to provide more flexibility in the Veterans Readiness and Employment Program. Can you elaborate on how this bill would benefit disabled veterans?
Yes, sir. So the VRNE program, when utilized correctly, can be a fantastic life-changing program. The non-degree granting part of it is not the most important part in our minds of VRNE. It's getting them employed. If that leads to gainful employment in whatever field that might be, we support that endeavor.
Well, outstanding. With that, I yield back. Thank you very much for that, and I now yield to Ranking Member Levin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. I'll start with Ms. Bartlett. I want to thank you for your written testimony on the Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act. I think you perfectly explained the problem at hand that, and I quote, "While relief exists for federal student loan borrowers impacted by fraud, the same is not true for VA education beneficiaries," end quote. It's incredibly unfair to GI Bill students, especially given the sacrifices they've made through their service or that of their loved one. What kind of message do you think it sends to veterans and military families that we have this discrepancy?
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. Appreciate the question. The message that the discrepancies currently exists shows that there is a movement to make sure that these student veterans and other military-affiliated students are taken care of. This piece of legislation puts forth that with the understanding that VA will also be restored in the support that they've given that student veteran and other military-associated student veterans. So this is something that needs to be done and moving in the right direction.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Look forward to working with you and student veterans on this legislation. And I'll turn to my friend, Mr. Murray. It's always good to see you, sir. Chairman Van Orden's legislation to expand job counseling in TAP for states will improve the TAP process, helping transitioning service members prepare better to find a job. It's now been more than 4 years since the last significant changes to the TAP process. And I'd like to take the opportunity just to get your views on where we are with TAP today. So the first question is, have the 2019 NDAA TAP changes that were made after I first got elected, have they been effective?
Short answer to that, yes. There have been great improvements to the TAP program. Where it came from years ago, where it is today, it's considerably better. However, it's a DOD-managed program, and DOD is not providing proper oversight of it. We know it's not this committee's job, but we call on all of Congress to make sure that TAP is being administered correctly. Specifically, the change that this bill would allow is for state agencies to be able to contact service members while they're going through the TAP portion. Roughly, normally it's about 6 months out. The law calls for 1 year out. We see that DOD is not adhering to those metrics. This will allow two-way communications. A recent change that was put in, DD Form 2648, allows service members to send their forms, their relevant documents, to state agencies. Those state agencies cannot respond back. This will allow for two-way communication. However, it is the role of the Transition Assistance Manager to make connections in the communities to which service members are transitioning to. We had a hearing last year, and there are a lot of great resources in San Diego, for example. That's not just sending your DD 214 to the California State Agency. It's reaching out to those groups in the community that do really substantive work for transition around the country. That's what we want to see happen. This is a good step in that right direction.
Appreciate that. Any other witnesses have any ideas or suggestions on further improvements to TAP? None?
A joint hearing between House Veteran Affairs Committee and the House Armed Services Committee would be fantastic. Make sure that they're adhering to something where we see about 175 to 200,000 troops getting out every single year. That should be an evergreen priority of the Armed Services Committee. We haven't seen that since, I believe it was 2018 was the last time there was a TAP hearing in the Armed Services Committee. It's too long.
I could not agree with you more, Mr. Murray, and I know you and I have talked about this, and you know, from my friend, the chairman, so important that we try to get our committee together with HASC to do a joint hearing, and I know you'll all have plenty of comments at that time. TAP is so important. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Bartlett.
Thank you, Representative Levin. Something that was mentioned at our joint hearing just a few months ago was the understanding that when a service member goes from TAP to as a veteran, that they're aware of the professional adjustment that they can perform in their FAFSA application. So there's an understanding that when they come out and now they're the veteran and they're filling out the FAFSA, that FAFSA is not being implemented with their last income tax when they had a job through the military. But it's being adjusted through the institution, a conversation through the institution and that student veteran with the understanding that they've recently transitioned.
Got it. I appreciate that. Thank you all. We look for your continued input, feedback on improvements to TAP. And with that, I'll yield back to the chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I now recognize Mr. Subcommittee from Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all of you. Thanks for being here. In the interest of time, I know we're combining some of the efforts, so I'm going to read a few words here on the VedTech bill, and then I'll open up for some quick questions. But thank you, Chairman Van Orden and fellow members of the subcommittee. I'm grateful that my bill, H.R. 1669, the VedTech Authorization Act, is being considered today. This bipartisan effort, which I introduced with Chairman Bost and also Congressman Khanna, would permanently authorize the Veteran Employment through Veteran Education Courses, or VedTech program. As part of the Forever GI bill that was signed into law in 2017, Speaker McCarthy and Congressman Khanna established the VedTech pilot program, which allows eligible veterans to gain experience and training in high-demand tech jobs. Since the start of the VedTech program in 2019, over 12,000 veterans have completed the program in areas like computer programming, software development, data processing, and other in-demand careers. This is crucial to strengthening our American workforce. Of the veterans that completed the program, roughly 64% are offered a job relating to the training they received, with an average salary of around $65,000 a year. These results show that the program works, and with permanent authorization, more veterans will be able to participate in the program each year. I am proud to have partnered with Chairman Bost and Congressman Khanna on this legislation, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to ensure veterans can continue to grow in the civilian workforce. Now, Mr. Brennan, and all veterans here today, including those on the subcommittee panel, I want to just thank you all for your sacrifice, for your service to our country. Mr. Brennan, thank you for being here, and I sincerely appreciate the support from the American Legion on permanently authorizing the VedTech program. Can you discuss how your members can have benefited actually from the pilot program and the need for some of the changes to the program that we've highlighted?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. The VedTech program, as noted earlier, has been a huge success for veterans transitioning out of the service into civilian life. Our members have benefited from it because right now, as we note, there is a dire need for employment in these sought-after sectors. So we believe that making this program permanent and ensuring that they go into these jobs that are well-paying is instrumental to ensuring their successful transition back into the service.
Thank you.
Service.
I know. Thank you so much for that and for being here. This is a great potential that it has here to be permanent. We've seen the great success of it so far, and we're happy to be supporting it as well. So thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Subcommittee. I now recognize Ms. Ramirez from Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to first thank you all for your written testimonies, particularly on my legislation that creates some level of parity between Title IV and Title 38. As you know, the committee has long wished to restore veterans who have been defrauded or otherwise left holding the bag for bad actors. The GI Bill has had a profound impact on veterans as they return to civilian life. The educational benefits have provided the GI Bill instrumental service to helping veterans improve their economic security and promote their success in post-secondary education. Moreover, these benefits have helped ensure that veterans are fully supported and integrated into the education community. Sadly, as we know, there are still some predatory, often for-profit institutions that see GI Bill educational benefits and only see a profitable exploit. HR 1767, the Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act, is essential for the veteran community and it needs to be prioritized. The bill ensures that our veterans receive full educational benefits if a for-profit institution has wrongfully defrauded them. We're committed to our veterans, and part of that commitment is ensuring that the GI Bill educational benefit is honored for our veterans who have more than earned it, and their families and loved ones. My ranking member, Congressman Mike Levin from California, has shown his commitment to this issue for years, and I'm honored to have his support as an original co-sponsor of the bill, HR 1767. It's also earned support from key champions for vets, veteran education success, and student veterans of America. I want to come back to your testimony, and I want to ask you a couple of questions in the time that I do have. This question is for Ms. Bartlett, or anyone else could actually answer as well, but should there be an expectation that schools repay benefits if they fail to provide a student veteran the class that they promised them?
Thank you, Representative Ramirez. It is something that needs to be taken into account. These are federal funds that are being used for the veteran or the military-affiliated student veteran attending these institutions. So when a closure or false career expectations come from this, and VA and SSA decide to no longer use that institution for services, it does need to be taken into account.
So why has the VA not already acted to restore benefits for more students impacted by school closures or in instances of fraud?
Unfortunately, I am unable to answer that question for you, but looking at the trend of how Department of Education established the borrower's defense, it was just a matter of time for additional agencies to also work within that same manner.
So do you believe using the borrower defense is a good way to properly capture students who need the GI Bill restored?
It is one of the tools, but your legislation is going to lead to additional tools to ensure that they are made whole.
Got it. Thank you. And last question for you. Are there other triggers that would be appropriate to make sure that we're restoring these benefits for the veterans?
Other triggers would be, like I mentioned before, the false career expectations. When a veteran discusses with the institution's administration and they see that if they attend there and complete the degree, that there is going to be a job expectation for them coming out of that that is going to lead their family into success and security, we want to ensure that those actors that provide that information are doing well. But those actors that give false career expectations are under that scrutiny.
Thank you. Look, I just a few more words on my bill, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing and how, you've explained how critical this bill is to help restore those benefits. It's long past time to give our veteran community the justice they deserve. We have to ensure that no student veteran is ever robbed of their educational benefits, again, by making sure we're cutting off any predatory schemes. I really look forward to working with our ranking member, our chairman, and the entire Veteran Affairs Committee to ensure that every student veteran has access to their full educational benefits. I urge all of my colleagues to join us by co-sponsoring, and I look forward to swiftly moving to a committee markup. Thank you, and I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. I now recognize Mr. McGarvey from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate everybody's testimony today. I want to talk a little about H.R. 291, which is the Vaccine Discharge Parity Act, introduced by my colleague, Mr. Fitzgerald. This bill is going to reinstate GI benefits to veterans discharged due to refusing the COVID-19 vaccine. It means these individuals will get access to their benefits, which I think is a good thing to have veterans being able to access their benefits. It's also going to mean they're going to jump the line over other individuals still waiting for their benefits, such as those discharged under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law. So I'm for expanding benefits. But let's think about the frustration, the hurt, the betrayal that a lot of our veterans who were let go from their service under Don't Ask, Don't Tell have to wait again to try and access their GI education benefits. Enough's enough. Ms. Bartlett, could you speak a little bit about the need for comprehensive reform to eligibility for education benefits and not just picking here and there who gets them?
Thank you, Representative. A comprehensive reform would let those veterans understand that their government is behind them, and things that had made or issues that had made their discharge difficult or less than honorable is being discussed. Things such as underlying mental health conditions, MST, or because of their sexual orientation while service.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, we started off today talking about a tragedy for our soldiers down at Fort Campbell, a tragedy that so many, it's a risk anyone who puts on a uniform takes to serve us, right? And I think that it's important for us to be there for those who put on that uniform after they serve because of the risks they take. And so I hope this is an area we can get right and have a comprehensive reform so that the people who've served have access to the benefits they've earned. I stress that they've earned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGarvey. Hey, I just want to tell you, man, if there's anything we can do collectively as a body to assist with the service members' families from your state of Kentucky, just please ask. It's exceptionally important that these folks are recognized. We just got a whole bunch of new Gold Star moms or dads or husbands and wives, and it's just a bad thing. So that's a real offer. And then I just ask, with the concurrence of the ranking member, Mr. Levin, if I could ask Ms. Bodie a question. Is that all right? You good? You came out here from California, didn't you?
Yes, I did, all the way from Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. You flew right over what I call America. Hey, right? Sorry, I had to do it. That's for him. Thank you for your testimony and for coming out again from California. And I appreciate both your support of this bill with VETTEC and the recommendations on how to make the bill better. What methods have Code Platoon, or the VETTEC working group, which you're a member of, used to keep in communication with the veterans after graduation? And could these communication techniques be improved, in your opinion?
Thank you for the question. Our providers are always looking to improve communications with our veterans after they graduate. And we look forward to partnering with the VA especially. We think there's a lot of opportunity there to provide a united front and say that the program is not over when you graduate. The program is really over when you find that meaningful employment. And providers have really done a lot over the last 5 years during this pilot to improve our career services and improve those outreach efforts. But through the working group especially, we've seen that partnering with the VA and having all of us saying the same message to the veterans is really impactful. So we hope that we can really focus on that meaningful employment piece and leverage our relationship with the VA as providers to help with that outreach and keep veterans engaged and find those meaningful employment jobs for them.
Awesome. If there's any roadblocks that you run into, please tell us. I just think this is a winning program, and I'd like to see it come to fruition permanently. I want to thank you all for coming and for your views on this legislation discussed today. I believe the proposals we have here today, including VetTech, which we just discussed, Authorization Act of 2023, are incredibly important to ensuring veterans continue to use the benefits that they have earned. I look forward to continue working with the stakeholders, that's all of our vets and also the ranking member and the rest of the committee, to get these bills to the floor. With that, I yield to the ranking member, Mr. Levin, for any concluding remarks he might have.
No concluding remarks. I appreciate the chairman, appreciate all of our witnesses. Thanks for all the excellent work that you do.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin, and thank you again for coming to participate in today's hearing. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record statements from the Disabled American Veterans and Veterans Education Success. Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing stands adjourned.